Hi, I'm really happy to be able to share some thoughts with you that I have from a study I've been doing in the book of Esther. If you have an opportunity, read through the story of Esther. It's a really great story, and I think with application for the way we live today. Esther was a Jewish maiden who was living with the exiled Jews in Susa of Babylon under the care of her uncle, and during which time King Xerxes needed a queen. And so the young maidens of his kingdom were brought in, I'll say herded in, to be prepared, to be conditioned and chosen by the king to be a queen. One of them was to be a queen. And Esther was the woman who was chosen. So I think the story applies because, and Esther's situation spoke to me in that we live within the confines of our humanity, and I'm restricted by human authority. Even though as a Christian, I know that God is greater than any earthly authority, I still live within the confines of the reigning and government in my country. And that's what Esther was under. Even though she was under the reign and rule of the sovereign God of Israel, she needed to submit to the authority of the land, which was King Xerxes. I'm sure that wasn't part of her plan, but God's plan was for his glory and for the preservation and the goodness of the Jews. And Esther was part of his plan to save the Jews. What stands out to me is that in the season that we're in, we are feeling like restricted and confined. And Esther was limited to what she could do about the situation of being chosen to be a possible queen. And we have limitations now with COVID in where we go, wearing masks, gathering together, being close together, having close physical contact. Some of those things make us feel like exiles and living under a reign and rule that doesn't seem right. But I'm reminded that God's the ultimate authority and he has a plan. And sometimes that plan seems wrong to us and we want to rebel against the authority. But God uses the earthly authorities that are in place oftentimes to preserve and protect people and to just help us to understand that he is ultimately all-knowing, all-powerful. He is good. He loves us, his creatures and his creation. We're made in his image, and people and their plans can oftentimes cause harm or difficulties for us, but God can use those difficulties to bring about good. So Esther couldn't do as she pleased in the situation she was in. So the question was, what could she do that was right and good and of God within the circumstances that she had? And what she did was trust God. She was being led by God. And she let God do as he pleased, even though it may have seemed as though she was surrendered to the earthly authority. Her real surrender was to God, to trust his plans for her, and to even use her as part of rescue and restoration and peace for her people. So I just was encouraged by the thought of, even though this is a difficult time and I feel restricted, as I'm sure many of you do, I think that God has a plan for us and that we can trust that plan and we can follow him. We can submit to him and he will show us what's good and right, what we can do in the circumstances that seem limited to us. But when we're surrendered to a God who is without limits, he can use us within the confines of the restrictions that sometimes humanity brings upon us. So I pray that you can submit yourself to that good God today and see what kind of good thing he would have you do in your circumstances. And be sure and read the story of Esther.